Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a stack of material here, diving deep into something that, well, it touches every single person who's ever had a job, managed someone, or even just thought about what makes people tick at work.
Absolutely. Workplace motivation and emotion.
Yeah.
It's fundamental, isn't it? Understanding why we do, what drives our effort, and how those powerful things we call emotions are completely, woven into that process.
Exactly. And the mission of this deep dive is to really zero in on the most important nuggets from these sources. We want to help you cut through the noise, understand what energizes and directs human behavior when you're on the clock,
Uh-huh.
why emotions aren't just a side effect but are absolutely linked to this, and how crucial this is, especially right now with so many people navigating remote work.
It's essential knowledge, really, whether you're trying to boost performance, build a great team, or just figure out what makes you want to jump out of bed and get to work.
So let's start with the core idea, motivation. The sources get right to it, defining it simply as goal-directed behavior. It's those forces that initiate, activate, and maintain what you do. Think of the Latin root. Movere, it just means to move.
It means to move, exactly. It's an internal condition, sort of something we infer from watching someone's behavior,
Yeah.
leading them towards a goal.
Okay.
In the work world, this means the desire or willingness employees have to achieve the organization's goals. It's also tied into that overall group morale, the esprit de corps.
And from a management perspective, the material makes it clear there are specific things you're trying to motivate people to do. Join the company, stay there, show up consistently,
Perform well.
perform well, and go beyond the basic requirements, being good corporate citizens, embracing the culture.
Now let's bring in emotion. The sources describe emotions as subjective states.
Hmm.
Joy, frustration, fear, excitement, the feeling aspect of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
They involve physical arousal, like your heart racing, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the things that regulate, influence, and organize our behavior.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The sources immediately make this incredibly strong point. You absolutely cannot separate motivation and emotion.
No, you can't.
Why is that distinction so critical?
It's critical because emotions aren't just happening while you're motivated. They are, in many ways, driving the motivation. They
Wow.
influence the strength of your drive and how you appraise a situation, how you size it up, essentially. How you feel about a task or a goal is going to directly impact whether you pursue it and how much effort you put in.
So they're intertwined.
They are, in so many ways, two sides of the same coin. You really can't pull them apart.
So emotions are the fuel, and they also filter how you see the path ahead. Okay, that connection is key.
Definitely.
Now, digging deeper into motivation itself, we said it's that internal condition leading to goal-directed behavior.
Yes. And within that work context, it's about hitting those organizational targets. And like you said, managers use these concepts to get people to join, stay, perform, contribute positively.
Right. And what jumps out immediately from the sources is the fundamental split they make. Extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. This feels really important.
It's probably the most foundational distinction. Extrinsic motivation comes from outside external circumstances, situations, rewards, or maybe punishments.
Like a bonus.
Could be a tangible bonus, a prize, or something intangible like public recognition, praise, or even just avoiding getting yelled at.
So it's the stuff you get for doing the work. The external carrot or stick.
Pretty much. Intrinsic, then, is the opposite.
Precisely. Intrinsic motivation comes from within. The behavior itself is the reward.
Okay.
You do it because it brings you satisfaction, a sense of achievement, or pure enjoyment. You're engaged simply because it's interesting, challenging, or personally rewarding.
The material mentioned a fascinating South African study
Yes.
that linked job characteristics and non-monetary rewards, like supportive leadership, to increased intrinsic motivation.
Right. It wasn't just about the external paycheck.
No.
The nature of the work and the environment fueled that internal drive.
That really highlights it. Concepts like flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's idea, where you're totally absorbed in enjoying the work itself, or engagement, that passionate involvement with your work and goals, these are deeply rooted in intrinsic motivation.
It's the difference between someone just working to pay the bills and someone who genuinely loves their job, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that note about engagement often developing in the first 6 months.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And correlating with the company's reputation and even student performance. It shows how powerful that internal connection is. It influences external perceptions and results.
Okay, solid ground. Now let's explore the different lenses the sources use to explain motivation. They talk about different paradigms or ways of looking at the same complex thing.
Think of them as different angles. Each sheds light on different aspects of why someone is motivated.
Okay, let's start with what the employee brings with them into the workplace. The material emphasizes that everyone arrives with unique attributes, experiences, their basic physiological and psychological makeup, talents, abilities.
Right, their whole history. And this is where diversity becomes not just an HR topic, but a core motivation topic.
How so?
Well, different cultural factors, worldviews on family, life stages, even how you approach authority can deeply influence someone's perspective. And if managers don't understand that, they can unintentionally become demotivating.
Makes sense. One angle the sources explore is the physiological side, like homeostatic drive theory. This is about the body trying to maintain balance, right? Homeostasis.
It's simple at its core, like feeling thirsty and drinking to restore balance. That's the corrective mechanism. But the material points out there's also a perspective element.
Planning ahead.
Exactly. You anticipate needing balance in the future. Like bringing a jacket if you know you'll be cold later. How does this relate to work? Maybe anticipating the stress of a deadline motivates you to start early to avoid feeling overwhelmed later, maintaining that mental equilibrium.
That's a great connection. Personality differences are also crucial. Values, those learned beliefs with emotional weight that guide our behavior, are one layer.
Definitely. And personality traits themselves are increasingly used to explain and predict performance. The sources highlighted the big five: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness.
Right. And how they map to work. Conscientiousness, being reliable, thoughtful, achievement-oriented, generally links to good performance across the board.
Seems logical.
Extroverts might thrive in management, openness in creative roles like advertising, but the material specifically noted a challenge right now. Remote work can be particularly difficult for individuals high in neuroticism due to potential isolation.
That's a really relevant point today. The debate about talents and abilities is also interesting. The argument is people like doing what they're good at and seek challenges that match their skills. Seems logical.
It does, but the sources add a vital point.
Yep.
You need a nurturing environment for that to translate into motivation and achievement.
It's not automatic.
No. And acknowledging that unequal social positions can mean equally motivated and talented people end up with vastly different levels of success. It's not just about the individual's drive or talent.
Which leads us nicely to the idea that motivation isn't only internal. The work environment itself is a massive factor. This brings us to organizational factors.
Quality of work life, or QWL. It isn't just one theory. It's presented more as an approach focused on employee well-being and satisfaction.
Yes, it's about creating an environment where people can thrive. That includes everything from the physical space, they call it environmental sculpting,
Right.
to designing jobs that meet individual needs job sculpting.
The list of factors in the material is long. It touches on everything from adequate and fair pay, safety, to challenging work, growth opportunities, a pleasant environment, feeling like the company cares about employee welfare.
A culture of identity, equality, belonging, mobility.
Having your input valued, absence of undue stress, healthy social relations, job security, work-life balance. It's quite comprehensive.
And the South African perspective specifically called out dignity, respect, and being treated as adults as key values here. Not just policies, but fundamental respect.
Another classic here is Herzberg's two-factor theory. This offers a powerful distinction between things that prevent unhappiness and things that actually create motivation.
He called them hygiene factors and motivators. Hygiene factors are sort of external. They prevent pain or dissatisfaction.
Like pay.
Pay, working conditions, job security, even having the right tech for remote work. A good laptop, decent fiber connection.
Okay.
The university example is perfect. A broken copier makes you unhappy, maybe frustrated. But a working one doesn't suddenly make you super motivated to write your thesis faster. It just removes a source of annoyance.
Right. Hygiene factors, when present, prevent dissatisfaction, but they don't actually drive higher performance or engagement.
Exactly. Motivators, on the other hand, are internal, focused on psychological growth.
Things like recognition, feeling supported, opportunities to learn and grow, getting help from management when you need it, especially remotely.
Right. These are the things that actually increase motivation and lead to better performance. At the university, it's the inspiring lecture, the challenging research project, the recognition for a good paper. Those are the motivators.
Okay, that distinction is clear. Hygiene keeps you from quitting. Motivators make you want to excel.
That's a good way to put it. How jobs are structured. Job design also fits under organizational factors and significantly impacts satisfaction and motivation. Hackman and Oldman's model links experiencing meaningful work to better motivation and performance.
The material covers a few ways jobs can be designed or redesigned. There's job rotation, where you switch tasks, like a policeman doing different duties, desk work one week, patrol the next.
Good for gaining skills, avoiding boredom, maybe feeling more valued because you're versatile.
Then job enlargement, adding more tasks at the same skill level, like the bank teller doing deposits and foreign exchange.
That one's tricky. It can fight boredom, but if not handled well, it just feels like more work for the same reward.
Yeah.
Can be seen as unfair.
Yeah, I can see that. And job enrichment, this is key, giving more complex tasks, more responsibility, more authority.
Right, like a clerk managing a small project or supervising a junior colleague.
The goal is to create a more complete piece of work, offer more control, variety, and direct feedback. The material notes employees often expect more pay with this, though.
Naturally, if you're taking on more, you expect.
It's be compensated. And its absence can demotivate.
Sure, self-managing teams or semi-autonomous work groups are a step further. The team gets the goal, resources, and authority to figure out how to achieve it with minimal manager interference.
Like a university group assignment where the professor just sets the topic and deadline.
Exactly. Management sets the direction, the team manages the process.
And the material distinguishes job design, top-down, organization creates the job, from job redesign, management-driven change, and then there's job crafting.
Ah, yes. That's the employee-driven version.
Yeah.
Where you actively shape your role, tweak your tasks and relationships to better fit your own preferences, skills, and motivations, making it more meaningful for yourself.
That sounds empowering.
It can be. Shifting focus slightly, some theories specifically look at meeting core needs, those internal drives that create tension and push us to act to relieve it. There's overlap with other theories, of course, but the focus here is on those fundamental human requirements.
And the most famous is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those 5 levels.
Everyone knows the pyramid.
Right. Physiological basics like food and shelter at the bottom, then safety, security, social belonging, ego or esteem units, and finally self-actualization at the top, striving to be your full potential.
The idea is you generally need to satisfy the lower needs before moving up, although the material notes this hierarchy isn't always rigid in reality. Life's messier than a perfect pyramid.
True. And self-actualization isn't really an endpoint, is it? It's more about the striving.
Yeah.
Characteristics include things like accepting uncertainty, questioning norms, creativity, ethics, continuous growth.
Definitely. And the sources included that critique.
Oh, the cultural one.
Yeah, pointing out that Eurocentric scales used to measure these needs in a South African study weren't necessarily valid. It highlights how culture influences even these seemingly universal concepts.
Very important point. Alderfer's ERG theory offered an alternative with just 3 needs: existence, like Maslow's lower levels material, physical safety,
Relatedness, belonging, social connection.
and growth, developing abilities, changing self-environment, similar to self-actualization.
A key difference, he proposed. Multiple needs can be active simultaneously. You don't have to fully satisfy existence before working on growth.
That feels more realistic, and the frustration regression idea.
Right. If you're blocked at a higher level, say growth opportunities are lacking, you might focus more intensely on a lower one, like demanding better pay, existence, or seeking more social connection, relatedness.
So managers need to support all 3 concurrently, not just sequentially like a strict pyramid.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. McClelland's needs theory is fascinating because it says these core motivational needs are actually learned, often from influential people early in life, family, teachers, respected figures.
Okay, so not innate like Maslow or Alderfer suggested.
That's his perspective. He focused on 3 main learned needs: affiliation, NAF-liking social interaction, wanting to be liked, achievement, napped desire to achieve goals effectively, master tasks, and power, empowered desire to control or influence others. He also distinguished between personalized power for self-aggrandizement and socialized power to benefit others or the organization.
And the insight here is that individuals have a dominant need. One tends to drive them more than the others.
Yes, and this profile matters. The sources note that effective managers often have high needs for achievement and socialized power, but interestingly, a lower need for affiliation. They need to make tough decisions, not just be popular.
That makes sense. And people high in NAC, they like achievable goals, feedback, initiative.
Right. They value growth and strive to improve. Societies with high NACs tend to be more productive, apparently. This has huge implications for selecting, placing, and training people, especially managers. You need to tailor strategies.
Okay, so we've looked at internal traits, the work environment, and fundamental needs. Now let's talk about theories focused more directly on directing behavior, on getting specific things done. These are more action-oriented.
Goal-setting theory is a prime example here. It argues that our behavior is regulated by our intentions, our conscious goals. Having clear goals is what directs and energizes us.
Like Blanchard and Johnson's one-minute manager concept, using clear goals. The material outlines 3 key points from goal-setting research.
Yes. First, specific goals are better than vague ones like do your best.
Measurable is key.
Second, harder goals generally lead to higher performance if the person is committed to them. And third, things like incentives or participation or feedback only boost performance if you're actually committed to the goal in the first place. The commitment is crucial.
So the goals need buy-in. They work best when they're mutually acceptable, maybe developed through consultation, creates ego investment.
Exactly. And we often hear about SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. That framework comes straight out of this thinking. Self-efficacy, your belief in your own ability to hit that goal, is also critical. If you don't believe you can do it, the goal won't motivate you.
Right. Behavior modification takes a different tack, focusing purely on the consequences after a behavior. Thorndike's law of effect.
Classic idea. Actions followed by positive outcomes are repeated. Actions followed by negative outcomes are avoided. Simple reinforcement.
It's about controlling the environment and using reinforcement, maybe extrinsic like pay or recognition, or intrinsic like the feeling of a job well done to shape behavior, rather than focusing too much on internal thoughts or needs. The reward or punishment has to be valued by the employee, though.
Absolutely. Speaking of thoughts, some theories see people as fundamentally rational thinkers making decisions based on their beliefs. These are the belief-based theories.
Expectancy theory by Vroom is a great example here. People aren't just driven by needs. They do a kind of subconscious cost-benefit analysis. They are motivated by the expected results of their actions.
It's quite logical. There are 3 parts to the calculation, basically.
Okay.
Valence. How much do I value the potential outcome or reward? Instrumentality. How likely is it that my performing well will actually lead to that outcome? And expectancy. How likely is it that my effort will lead to successful performance in the first place?
Effort, performance, outcome.
Right. And Vroom put it in an equation. Motivation force, expectancy x instrumentality x valence. If any of those are 0, the motivation is 0.
It boils down to 3 questions an employee is asking, maybe subconsciously. If I try hard, can I actually perform well? Expectancy. If I perform well, will I really get the promised consequence? Instrumentality. And do I actually want that consequence? Valence.
Precisely. The sources mention entrepreneur studies supporting this rational model. People weigh the odds.
Equity theory focuses on something else fundamental, our desire for fairness, the justice motive.
Hugely important. We constantly compare our inputs, effort, skills, time, and outcomes, pay, recognition, promotions, interesting tasks, with others doing similar work.
Are referent to others.
Exactly.
Right.
We compare internally with colleagues and externally with people in similar jobs elsewhere, or even against our past selves. The material stressed how crucial this is in the South African labor context.
Yes, with strikes often fueled by perceived inequities, especially pay gaps between management and employees.
Right. And that university study finding pay inequity linked to lower academic commitment, that feeling of being treated unfairly is profoundly demotivating. It hits deep.
Self-efficacy theory, which we touched on with goals, fits here too. It's fundamentally a belief about your own competence.
Yes. High self-efficacy means you believe you have the ability, you're resourceful, you can overcome obstacles, you'll take on challenges.
Low self-efficacy means you feel your effort won't matter because you lack the skills or the situation is rigged. You might avoid challenges or give up easily. It profoundly impacts your willingness to even try.
Cognitive evaluation theory, which is part of the broader self-determination theory, adds another layer. It argues intrinsic motivation thrives when behavior is perceived as self-determined, when you feel you're in control, not just a pawn.
So the psychological meaning matters more than the objective reality.
That's the idea. It contrasts feeling controlled by external factors, like rewards or punishments, with feeling autonomous and competent. A key insight is that external rewards can actually undermine intrinsic motivation.
Wait, rewards can hurt motivation?
If they're perceived as controlling rather than simply providing information about competence. If you love painting and someone starts paying you specifically for each painting, you might start feeling like you're only doing it for the money, not the inherent joy. The locus of control shifts.
Ah, okay. The material uses student examples. Are you studying because your parents are making you external control undermines intrinsic interest, or because you care about your future career, self-determined intrinsic?
Exactly. The same behavior studying is motivated differently based on your belief about its source. It shows how beliefs about ourselves, about the event itself, and the management environment profoundly shape our intrinsic drive.
And that leads us directly to the manager's role, because the manager's approach is a huge factor influencing all of this.
Absolutely. McGregor's theories X and Y really highlight this fundamental difference in managerial assumptions.
Theory X managers assume employees are inherently lazy, avoid work and responsibility, and need close supervision, maybe even force.
The old command and control style.
Theory Y managers assume employees are ambitious, can enjoy work, seek responsibility, can be trusted, and gain satisfaction from achievement.
Right. This reflects that historical shift from the 20th century view of employees as a cost to be controlled to the 21st century view of employees as assets, valuing collaboration and empowerment.
And the sources emphasize the self-fulfilling prophecy here. This is powerful. The manager's assumptions can actually create the very behavior they expect.
If people define these situations as real, they are real in their consequences. That quote sums it up.
So, if a manager believes employees are lazy, theory X, they supervise tightly, offer little trust or autonomy, and guess what? Employees act disengaged, avoid responsibility, maybe slack off, confirming the manager's initial negative belief.
It becomes a vicious cycle. Whereas if they believe employees are motivated, theory Y, they offer trust, autonomy, development opportunities, leading to more engagement, responsibility, and initiative, which confirms that belief.
It becomes a positive cycle. The manager's belief shapes the reality.
This brings us to practical strategies. Many are rooted in these theories. A key concept mentioned is the psychological contract.
That unwritten set of mutual expectations between the employee and the organization. It's not in the formal contract.
No, it's based on perceived exchange. The employer implicitly expects competence, performance, loyalty perhaps, in return for pay, benefits, security, opportunities.
And the employee expects fair treatment, support, good working conditions, development in return for their compliance, effort, and skills.
Satisfaction hinges on how well these unspoken expectations match reality. The material included explicit examples from Sasol and Old Mutual and SA.
Right, they spelled out what the company expects, things like innovation, energy, integrity, hitting targets, and what employees can expect in return. Recognition, development, fair pay, talented colleagues, community involvement. Making these expectations explicit is vital.
Strategies for building a healthy psychological contract include things like having a clear vision and values, recruiting based on those values, applying policies fairly and consistently,
Two-way communication, fostering teamwork and community, providing real development opportunities that people-first approach.
having the right kind of managers who empower people, setting challenging but smart goals with regular feedback, and ensuring pay is equitable and linked to merit where possible.
And managing performance remotely adds another layer of complexity, often forced by circumstance rather than choice.
Definitely. Strategies highlighted there included focusing on purpose and results instead of micromanaging how the work gets done, granting autonomy.
Avoiding that virtual hovering.
Exactly. Showing compassion, especially if someone's struggling, celebrating achievements, managing workloads to prevent burnout, offering flexible deadlines where possible, and negotiating performance metrics collaboratively. It requires more trust and communication.
The ABC Medical Aid case study in the sources apparently illustrates how these theories can be applied in a remote context addressing Maslow's needs, using non-micromanagement, which links to McClelland's needs maybe, negotiated goals linking to goal setting.
Providing the necessary tech, which is a Herzberg hygiene factor, focusing on overall well-being, QWL, it ties a lot together.
What's striking, though, after going through all these evolving theories, is a note in the material.
A Saltonstall study from 1953.
Yes. That core motivating factors identified back then have remained incredibly consistent. Things like job satisfaction, feeling your work is worthwhile, having competent leaders, participation, recognition, fair wages, growth opportunities, security, good communication, a pleasant environment.
It's remarkable, isn't it? The why might be fundamentally constant, even if the how of work evolves dramatically with technology and remote work.
So, while the theories give us different lenses, the fundamental human desires at work seem pretty stable. The sources really stress the need for managers to foster creativity, use an open-minded approach to attract and keep talent, deeply consider diversity, and be ethical in how they apply these motivational tools.
You can't just manipulate people with these theories. It has to be genuine. And this brings us back full circle to emotional intelligence, or EI, which kind of ties it all together.
Right. Let's circle back to emotion as the fuel and filter. We defined it as the feeling aspect of consciousness, linked to physiological arousal.
The sources elaborate. Emotions regulate and organize our behavior. Subconscious emotions shape our attitudes, our thinking, our motivation itself. They even influence our perception of brands or services, building associations. They affect our whole disposition.
At the simplest level, emotions give us that basic assessment. Positive means approach, negative means avoid.
Based on our value system built from experience, memories, instincts, and that cognitive evaluation or appraisal process we talked about.
Emotions drive behavior, but they can also be internal states preparing us for action. Our control over expressing them depends on experience, personality traits, cultural norms.
The material distinguishes mood, temperament, and the actual expression of emotions. Primary emotions like joy, anger, fear, sadness, surprise, disgust are seen as potentially universal, with distinct physiological signs and maybe facial expressions.
Easily recognizable, perhaps.
Maybe. Secondary emotions are seen as more complex cultural blends, harder to recognize across cultures. Though the ability to recognize negative sounds across cultures seems easier than positive ones.
Yeah.
Except laughter. Laughter seems pretty universal.
Interesting. Emotional expression has components: the physical feeling, heart rate, temperature, the expressive signs, face, body language, the subjective feeling itself, and the behavioral response: hugging, yelling, running away.
Temperament is that stable, largely genetic emotional baseline. That pervasive personality dimension relating to emotions, consistency across situations and ages, like that manager who's just naturally more energetic versus a more passive employee.
And mood is different.
The mood is more a general feeling state resulting from a specific situation. It's usually shorter duration, linked to an occurrence. What put you in such a good mood? Or that made put me in a bad mood.
Got it.
Like, yeah.
Empathy, the ability to understand and share others' emotions, is presented as vital, especially for managers, rooted in that German idea of Einfühlung, or feeling into someone else's experience.
A state of oneness almost, vital human characteristic, and emotional intelligence EI. The ability to monitor your own and others' feelings, discriminate between them, and use that information to guide your thinking and actions.
This competency is crucial for navigating workplace motivation, isn't it?
Absolutely. It links directly to understanding your own emotional drivers, recognizing them accurately in others, and managing your own emotions effectively so you can act thoughtfully and work well with people.
So how do emotions actually arise? The material covers different theories, physiological ones, evolutionary ones. But I think focusing on the cognitive appraisal theories gives us the most practical insight linked back to motivation.
Agreed. While the physiological basis is obviously essential, the cognitive theories really highlight the interpretation aspect. Instead of just event feeling, these theories emphasize event interpretation feeling.
The same physical arousal, like your heart racing before a presentation, can be interpreted as debilitating fear or exhilarating excitement, depending on how you think about the situation.
Exactly. Two people face the same high-pressure situation. One feels overwhelmed and freezes, the other feels challenged and rises to the occasion. The physiological response might be similar, but their cognitive appraisal of the situation is different.
Schachter and Singer's two-factor theory is a classic here. They argued an emotional state is the result of physiological arousal, plus a suitable thought or cognition to label that arousal. You use situational cues to figure out what you're feeling.
Right. Their controversial epinephrine experiment, while debated ethically and methodologically, suggested that subjects experiencing unexplained physical arousal from the injection would take emotional cues from someone else's behavior, a confederate acting euphoric or angry, to label their own feeling.
It almost ties back to that self-fulfilling prophecy again. The manager's expectation and behavior create a situation the employee interprets, which influences their emotional state and behavior, potentially confirming the cycle.
It's plausible. Arnold and Lazarus also emphasized appraisal. Arnold saw emotion simply as a felt tendency towards anything appraised as good and away from anything appraised as bad. Appraisal starts the sequence.
Lazarus's cognitive meditational theory highlighted the constant interaction between the situation and our assessment of our ability to cope. It involves primary appraisal, is this event relevant, stressful, beneficial to me? And the secondary appraisal, what can I do about it? Can I handle this?
And coping could involve direct action or just cognitive reappraisal, changing how you think about it.
Again, the student example works. Interpreting a bad test score. Is it, I'm hopeless, leading to demotivating emotions like despair? Or is it, okay, this is a setback, how do I prepare better next time? Leading to more challenge-focused emotions, maybe determination. Our interpretation drives the emotional response, which then fuels motivation and action.
It really underscores the power of our thinking. And finally, culture and emotion. This is so important. Emotions aren't just purely biological. They're deeply shaped by the culture we live in, the language we use, social interactions, norms about what's okay to feel or express.
The material gave such interesting examples like Shinrin-yoku, the Japanese concept of forest bathing for relaxation and well-being.
Or gijel, a Tagalog word for that irresistible urge to pinch or squeeze something cute or someone you love.
Saudade, the Portuguese feeling of deep, melancholic longing for something or someone absent.
Or some unique African context examples. The Anlo people of Ghana's Silalam sensation. Differences in how Ghanaians versus Americans focus on bodily sensations versus emotions. Cultural views on attributing negative events, how guilt and pride might be experienced differently in collectivistic nations, or even how expressing pain might be discouraged in some cultures like Sapita Sesotho.
It shows how the very experience, conceptualization, and expression of emotion can be culturally relative. What feels normal or is even recognized as an emotion varies.
Which makes emotional intelligence absolutely essential for navigating today's diverse workplaces. You need that ability to understand the different ways people might feel and express themselves across cultures and manage your own responses appropriately and respectfully.
So bringing it all together, you see that strong, undeniable link again. Emotions are fundamental drivers of motivation, and the process of being motivated, striving for goals, inevitably stirs up emotions, both positive and negative.
We've explored a whole range of perspectives, from our inner physiological drives and personality traits to how the organizational environment shapes us through job design and culture, our core human needs, how our beliefs and expectations influence our actions, and the powerful impact of managers and cultural context.
What's consistently evident, I think, is the crucial role of individual and group diversity. Everyone brings their unique history, their learned beliefs, their cultural programming, which shapes how they're motivated and how they experience and express emotions. You can't ignore that.
That's why understanding these concepts is so important for managers and really for everyone at work. Even if, frustratingly, as the sources hint, some common management practices still inadvertently demotivate people despite all this knowledge.
Yeah, the knowing-doing gap.
And isn't it fascinating that even with all the workplace changes and theoretical evolution, those fundamental human desires identified back in the 1950s for meaningful work, fair treatment, growth, security, recognition, good leadership are still what fundamentally seem to move us today?
It suggests some core truths endure. Ultimately, grasping all this underscores the need for managers and employees to be open-minded, to foster environments where people feel valued and can be creative, to truly consider the diverse experiences people bring, and to think ethically about how we influence or try to influence others' drive and feelings.
And emotional intelligence is that vital skill, that competency for navigating this complex interplay between what drives us and how we feel along the way.
So that's our deep dive into the forces that move us at work and the feelings that color the journey. We've gone from the basics of what motivation and emotion even are, through all these different theories explaining where they come from, how the workplace and our own beliefs shape them, and why the manager's role and the cultural context are so incredibly vital.
Hopefully, understanding these concepts gives you a much clearer lens to look at your own experiences at work, maybe why you feel a certain way about a task, why you're driven by one thing but not another. And it also provides invaluable insight into understanding the people around you, your colleagues, your team.
Which leads to a final thought, something for you to consider. Given everything we've discussed, given that our drive involves complex, learned needs, and our emotions are so deeply shaped by culture and our personal history, how much can we realistically create a single, universally motivating or emotionally supportive workplace environment for everyone? Especially when teams are spread across different cultures, different countries, different physical locations even. Is a truly universal approach even possible or desirable? That's something worth thinking about as you navigate your own place in the working world.